time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we're doing another live show, and I've got two special guests with me. I've got Dr. Bill Kimberlin, who is the author of Watch Me Die. Dr. Bill is probably one of the few people that you will hear who's actually witnessed multiple executions. And I've got with me, joining me, the co-author, the true crime professor, Dr. Brian Santana. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor, I should say.
Yeah, so Bill, I saw an article about how South Carolina executed their third person via firing squad. And I immediately thought of you because I thought, you know what, Bill's probably, at that one. And that always comes across my mind every time I see one. I'm like, I wonder if Bill is there. And so I thought, you know what, if he's not there, at least he's got some insight of what that experience is like and what that person is going through the months and weeks and day before the execution. So again, thank you for coming back on.
Thanks. Yeah. So I was not at that one, so I'll put that out there right now. And I do get that a lot from people whenever there's an execution. Of course, this year more than ever because of the number of executions. But I was not at the firing squad in South Carolina. I have not witnessed one of those at this time. All of my executions have been lethal injection, but different methods of lethal injections, and we can get into that here anytime. I have one coming up in Arkansas in 2026 with gas, but again, different methods of gas. All of these different executions, they're just different. So South Carolina, they've put 3 to death this year by firing squad. They're the only state that's utilized it this year. Of course, there's other states like Utah comes to mind right off the bat. They also have the firing squad. Idaho also. But the difference again is South Carolina has 3 sharpshooters. They're about 20, 25, feet away from the individual who is strapped to the chair, cover over the face, target over the heart. And then whenever the warden gives the secret sign to commence, then all 3 of them will fire a live round from a .308. So it's going to explode the heart instantly, which brings death, almost instantaneous. Probably realistically the most humane way to go out of all the different methods. But then you switch over to Utah or the other states, and then you have 5 different shooters with 30-30s instead of a .308, 4 live rounds, 1 blank. Nobody knows who has the blank. So when they fire, again, same process, hood over, target over the heart, death instantaneously. But it just shows the differences even within the states when they utilize what they call the same method of execution. So 2 different states, 2 different guns, 2 different numbers of shooters, 3 live rounds, all 3 shooting live rounds, other ones 5 rounds, 4 live ones, 1 blank. So it's it's just different in this country.
Do people that are condemned, I guess would be the word, do they have a preference? Are they asking for firing squad as opposed to the electric chair or the gas chamber?
So again, difficult questions to answer, and I'm not trying to get out of it, but just to give you an idea of what some of the rules are. So, and I have these, written down for my own purposes. So of all the different states that have the death penalty, say 33 states that actively use it, some authorize 2 different methods. So South Carolina, for instance, firing squad, lethal injection. They can choose. Other states It is based on when you were sentenced to death. So, Idaho, Utah, for instance, if you were sentenced to death prior to, like say 1990, then you're allowed to choose the firing squad. Anytime after that, it has to be lethal injection. Um, when I say you can choose the firing squad, you also have the option of choosing lethal injection. But if you're sentenced after a certain date, you don't have those options. It's going to be lethal injection. So typically, lethal injection is going to be your primary go-to for most executions. And then again, there's other states that have caveats where if the drugs are not available, then the second method will be, electrocution, will be a firing squad, will be gas, whatever. So it's different states, different methods at different times. And a lot of the inmates, they will choose. So I had one inmate in Florida who just died of natural causes this year, but he had chosen the electric chair and he was sentenced at that time that he could choose that. And he said flat out, he just did not want to he didn't want to be put to death with a needle in his arm like a junkie. That was his purpose for it. Other ones, they try to make a statement. When you have a method that is not commonly used, like the firing squad or like the gas, they know it's going to draw more attention. Some of them think that maybe they will win that appeal, for the cruel and unusual punishment aspect of it. But a lot of them, they're just they're resigned to the fact that either they're going to die or they're not, based on how long they've been on death row. They've gotten all these phantom dates in the past, so they're really not focused until that last, usually 30 days. When that execution warrant is signed by the governor, and then it'll expire in 30 days, that's usually when they'll take that inmate off of death row, place them on what's called a suicide watch for 30 days, because the state will do anything they can to make sure that that person does not harm themselves, so they're alive and well, so the state can put them to death. And then usually the last week, they'll have them even more isolated with somebody else in a separate cell in a different part of the pod. And then they can, they have more privileges of writing, calling on the phone and stuff like that until they're transferred to the death chamber, which most prisons it's in a different location. So.
Does that just seem odd to me or anyone else that they don't want you to commit suicide because they want to, kill you themselves?
So, I mean, the good doctor there could probably add to this conversation when that's when you start getting into the ethical dilemmas and the moral aspects of it. So I had the opportunity to speak at the Cleveland Clinic. They asked me to on the ethical dilemma that physicians face with people on death row and people serving life without, because of the fact that they will have extraordinary health care provided to them in order to keep them alive, in order to put them to death. So if say you or I get cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, whatever, we'll get the radiation, the chemotherapy, we'll get the surgeries, we'll get all of that in order to keep us alive long enough to put us to death. So then the ethical dilemma comes in to, why are we trying to save this person in order to kill them? And
and is that something that comes up with? I know the physicians are, because of their oaths, are prevented from taking part directly in the carrying out of the death penalty. But in a situation like you described, do doctors where the person has been, let's say, condemned to death, let's say they were having some severe mental health issues in the months leading up to their death, and the doctor's goal is to stabilize them enough so they can get them to the actual death chamber. Have you heard from physicians about that kind of like moral or ethical dilemma? Because it's not directly violating their oath and doing harm, but it also, you can see a chain of events where they're playing at least some part in that. right?
Mhm. Sure. So, one execution that took place this year was very controversial in the sense of the individual had an electronic pacemaker defibrillator that was inside of them, and what that does is whenever the heart goes out of rhythm or when it stops, it automatically will shock it back. Well, this person was scheduled to be executed lethal injection, and the question was, okay, is that going to create an issue? Because when the heart stops from the drugs, that's going to shock it back. Is that going to create a lot of cruel and unusual punishment? The fact that his heart rate is going to be irregular from the arrhythmia, from being anxious, from his body's natural defense mechanism kicking in. So the prison said, okay, fine, we will allow him to go to the hospital the day before. The physicians can disconnect that, and that way there it won't interfere with the execution. They take the individual in to have that done, and the physicians refuse to disconnect that defibrillator inside him because they did not want to partake in anything that was going to result in his death. And in doing that, it could cause a coronary at the time, because of the agitation. They certainly weren't going to be a part of the execution. So the Supreme Court had to step in, everybody else had to step in, and they're like, listen, they're not going to do it, but we're still putting him to death, and they did. So, I mean, you don't get much more of an ethical dilemma than that, in my opinion. But it just shows how the discrepancies in this country are when they have it in their mind to put that person to death.
With some states not being able to get the drugs for lethal injection, and I believe you mentioned it before that you're going to be witnessing one with nitrogen gas that essentially that suffocates them, right?
Yes. So nitrogen hypoxia. So again, the multiple executions that I've witnessed with lethal injection, each one of those have been different. So everything from a 3-drug cocktail, 2-drug cocktail, 1 drug.
Right.
So, a lot of times they will use the lethal injection drugs to put these individuals to death, but they want to make it appear to look peaceful just for the witnesses. They want the individuals witnessing it to think that it was a very humane way to die. So when you introduce that pancuronium bromide to the system, that paralyzes everything. The first thing is going to be the sodium pentothal. That's going to knock them out, render them unconscious. The pancuronium bromide is going to paralyze them, every muscle in their body, so they can't show any type of, twitching, gasping, or anything like that. And then the potassium chloride is going to essentially place their heart into cardiac arrest and kill them. Well, since there are no anesthesiologists or no medical physicians, not even nurses that take part in an execution, the drugs are just administered. So, if I'm a big guy, I'm like 6'4", 260, I'm going to get the same amount as somebody, that's, 5'10", 200 pounds. Some of these drugs are fast acting and they wear off quicker than others. And I've witnessed that where the pancuronium bromide, the paralyzation agent, was already out of the system, basically. It metabolizes quickly. And I could see the individual gasping and convulsing and shaking and everything else while his heart was going into cardiac arrest, giving them a heart attack because your body's defense mechanisms kick in. So, it's bizarre in the sense that we try to get these drugs to put them to death. The drug makers will refuse to supply these drugs because they make these drugs in order to save lives, not kill them. So every drug that's utilized in an execution is needed in regular hospital settings. Everybody's going to get the sodium pentothols, they get knocked out, or the pancuronium. You're going to have paralyzation agents, administered when they're having surgery, so you're not twitching and they nick an artery or anything like that. So they're very useful drugs. the drug companies were saying, we're not going to supply them, therefore you can't execute. And the United States, being the country that we are, we start looking for better and quicker and better, guaranteed ways to kill an individual. So instead of saying, okay, maybe we need to rethink our whole sentencing process and not put people to death, that's when they start introducing the firing squad here and the nitrogen hypoxia here, electrocution there. And again, it's, when we had the gas chambers, like in San Quentin and elsewhere, you're talking, sulfuric acid, a bucket underneath them, and a cyanide tablet was released into that, and then the fumes rose up, and that's how the person would expire. And it was a lengthy process. It was not a very good one to watch, I'm assuming. A very expensive way, because the seals had to be replaced on the chamber every time that was used. The body had to be hosed down with the ammonia and everything else. So that's when people think of, being put to death by gas, that's what they think of. But again, we've implemented new ways, and now we're introducing nitrogen, 100% nitrogen, with a mask over the face, and you die from nitrogen hypoxia. You suffocate to death. You breathe in nothing but nitrogen. So it's it's bizarre, but that's how we are over here.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your book, when you're talking about, I believe it was in your book, about the fast-acting effect, where, like you're saying, these are not trained doctors or nurses that are hooking up the IVs. And one of the teams, the detention officers, were having trouble getting the IV in, and the guy had to go to the bathroom. And, I would imagine...
That was my very first execution. And, I had no idea what to expect, because the process is not transparent to people at all. And they keep it that way. So the inmates have no idea what to expect, let alone the witnesses. And when I asked the assistant warden or whatever, how long the process typically takes, they're like, 20 minutes tops, you'll be in and out, from the death chamber. So we go over, and again, no doctors, no nurses. It's prison EMTs and guards, and they're, first of all, they have to find the veins. Some of these individuals on death row have used IV drugs, intravenous drugs, for many years prior to, so their veins aren't the greatest. A lot of them put on a lot of weight, so you have the obesity aspect of it, so the veins are not easy to locate. So you have these, I watched them put needles into the arms, into the neck, into the ankles, the legs, anywhere they could try to find the port of entries. And again, states are different. Ohio, you had to have 2 ports of entry. So just because they found one arm vein, they still had to find another one somewhere. So they had hooked up a bag of saline solution to run to keep that port open while they're working on the other side. And it was to the point where that bag had emptied out. He had to use the restroom. Said, "Hey, man, I gotta piss." And they're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I gotta go to the bathroom." They're like, "Okay." So they let him get up off the table, walk over, like you'd see in a hospital with the IV attached to him. He goes to the bathroom, comes back, hops back on. They start working on him again. And the whole time we're sitting there, feet away from this individual while this is going on. And then, they finally get the ports done. They get everything done like that. And then they have to connect them. And the guard's hands was shaking so bad, another guard had to hold it, so they can connect the catheters together. And it was just, I really couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It took about 2 hours from start to finish.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what gets me about the firing squad. That, taking away the debate of whether, capital punishment should happen or not, I would just think that if you've got someone that's trained in a skill,
Yes.
that would be the more effective way than having to have people that are untrained in something and basically guessing, right? Like with these drugs. this is like you were saying before. Oh, well, I mean, I wonder if are they just like Googling these amounts and looking at the guy and just going for it and see what happens? Because
they have a protocol, uh, an execution protocol, which is again something that is kept from the general public. It's not a document that can be seen by the public. I was very fortunate enough to get the only one that I've ever seen in my life from Ohio. The only reason I got that one was because a judge friend of mine, before he became a judge, was a defense attorney. One of his clients was getting the death penalty. I was down there for that, and so was he. The judge was totally against the death penalty at this time and wanted to stop it. And as a common police court judge in the state of Ohio, you really don't have that type of authority. So what he did do is he petitioned legislators in Ohio to provide him the death row protocol while he was on the bench, the judge. And they had to argue that, and the court finally agreed that since it was a judge that was requesting it, since he had to sentence people to death or not to death, he had that authority and that power, they would have released him a copy of it, but it wasn't to be published. And so he received it, and it's thick. It's about 400 or 500 pages. And once he got it, he called me and he says, "I got the death row protocol for you." So I went to his chambers as a whole different county at the time, and I asked him, I'm like, "How can I have this without getting in trouble?" He explained that since he was a public official and this was released to him, then it became public information from him being a public official. So he gave it to me, and I still have it to this day. And I mean, you read through this thing, and it would take a Philadelphia lawyer to even decipher it. So I don't know how they really come up with the process or the drugs. I think they order a huge amount at one time, and they have to go and get it from the pharmacy, and then they store it. A lot of times these drugs are expired. So if the defense attorneys aren't asking to see what the expiration dates on them and things like that, that's another concern that people have.
Brian, what are your thoughts so far?
No, I think it's interesting because it seems like, I mean, just on the surface as you were talking, I never thought about this idea that I realized that the individuals placing the IVs were not, strictly speaking, like medical professionals. They might have an EMT certificate or something like that.
Right.
But it is interesting, as you were talking about it, Cameron, to think about this idea that just by very definition, if you're thinking about cruel and unusual, it seems like putting someone in a situation that they're not actually professionally trained to deal with would almost cause, like, whereas you're talking about the firing squad, I mean, you are talking about people that are sharpshooters and have some level of expertise. I saw in South Carolina the execution, the shooters were 15 feet away. I would hope that someone 15 feet away that was a sharpshooter would have a reasonable degree of accuracy in that. And so it seems like if you were just doing a cruel and unusual kind of challenge, regardless of kind of how you feel about the capital punishment, it seems like with the circumstances of lethal injection, that's a pretty strong argument. And I know it's one that has not held up historically, but it is kind of amazing when you step back to think about it, that people who are not trained, who are not medical professionals, are carrying out what's essentially a medical procedure when you're talking about IVs and other things. But it's it causes you to think about it a little bit different. Has your opinion since watching these changed? Has the opinion you had before, let's say, witnessing an execution, changed as a result of seeing this process up close, do you think, in terms of like lethal injection?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, going into this, people have to realize that I never set out to do the work that I've done over the last 20 years. I was a college professor as well, teaching psychology, abnormal psych, social psych, and everything else, and the same heated topics and debates back then are the same ones right now. Legalization of drugs, abortion rights, gun rights, and capital punishment. I've been fortunate enough to be, I've been to other countries, so I knew about the drug laws. I've hunted all my life, so I knew everything about the guns that I needed to know. I have had the unfortunate, I guess, privilege of going into abortion clinics and counseling females. So I knew about that. What I did not know anything about was the death penalty. And I always said I would never be the type to teach book smarts only. When I started looking into it, everybody was just book smarts. So having some of the connections that I had with my friends in the judicial system, contacted the Attorney General of the state of Ohio, literally called on the phone, asked, the receptionist picked up. I said, hey, I need to go to death row. I need to witness execution. I need to see some stuff, to teach about it. And they hung up on me. I thought that was pretty freaking rude. So I called back. I'm like, I don't think you understand who I am. And they're like, I don't think you understand that the Ohio Revised Code sets the laws and the guidelines on execution process, death row, who can go, all of this stuff. But since you're the first person, they probably thought I was, special needs or something. The first person ever called to ask this. What we're going to do is send you the Ohio Revised Code of this section and the list of people for the next 3 years in the state of Ohio that's scheduled to die. If you can find any loopholes, have at it. So they sent me that. I found some loopholes, went down to death row. And at the time it was in Mansfield, Ohio, right next to where they filmed, Shawshank Redemption, because I lived close by there. And I went on death row, and I was only going to go once or twice to meet a couple people, to talk to them. The warden let me in. I got free reign of that. And when I was leaving, a guy asked me once if I wanted to watch him die. And I'm like, okay. So that's all it took, was that one personal invite to allow me to witness execution. And then from there it mushroomed, because other inmates found out that I witnessed it, and that they could talk to me and they could find out what the process was like. And then I started getting requests from all over, and then different states, when I started branching out to research different death rows, because I only started on Ohio's death row. So back to your original question, has my opinion changed? I would say, yeah, pretty dramatically, because of the fact that I was like a lot of other people. It's like putting a dog to sleep or something. I like dogs. I don't want to watch a dog put to sleep either, but it's got to be that simple. And then you realize you never see the executioner, you never see the physician, because there is a physician there at all times. But I found out that person is there to pronounce the body dead, and the curtain will close before that physician comes out. They'll pronounce it dead, mark the time, and then go back with the executioner that you never see. That's the main reason. The other reason is there's actually a phone on the wall, and if that rings, if it's the Supreme Court or the governor, and if they've already started the process, then that physician will intervene with the crash cart and do whatever it needs to be done to try to save that individual. But you never see the physician, you never see the executioner.
Just another question I thought about was, so you described the way that some prisoners on death row have chosen a method that is not very common, specifically because they imagine it will get media attention. And I was just thinking about this idea that, so the state there's this kind of performance that the state is engaging in, right? The power to put someone to death, and the death penalty itself is a kind of spectacle. What does that, in the prisoners you've interacted with, do they view that as an opportunity? Are they trying to wrestle back that power and kind of claim control over their own death, or kind of what it means? Or I'm sure it varies per individual, but have you interacted with individuals who kind of are trying to take control of the spectacle and kind of exert some power, even in whatever way they can at the very end?
It's interesting, because the interaction that I have with them, nearly all of them have resolved to the fact that they're going to die. And they're typically ready for it, because they've been on death row for so long, 20, 30 years before the execution is actually carried out. I have found in my experiences that the ones that make the most noise are the attorneys, not the defendants. The defendants will actually refuse a lot of times to go to the clemency hearing. They don't want their attorneys to even file for clemency. They don't want to be seen as weak, begging for their life or anything like that to spare it when it gets to that point. It's typically the attorneys that want to push this issue more and more to try to get people to go against the death penalty. So they'll bring out a lot of different circumstances that may or may not have transpired during the execution. They'll talk about the cruel and unusual aspect of it, the suffering that could have gone on, everything. They'll bring in the religious aspect with the spiritual advisor, whether they should be allowed in the chamber or not, and they'll bring up a lot of different legal topics from their standpoint. But more often than not, the defendant, they've resolved to the fact that just put me to death. I don't care about any of that.
Yeah, that's what was awkward about when you're telling the story about the guy that had to go pee. It's like he's getting up off of a table, he goes to pee, and then he voluntarily gets back on the table knowing that they are about to kill him. So there's no like fight or flight.
I've never witnessed one where because again, in Ohio, they make them walk to so they have the death cell separate from the death chamber, where nobody sees the death cell. And I've been to the death cell where I'm the last one to ever talk to them. And it's like a big cage. And I almost describe it like the Hannibal Lecter type, almost in the middle of a room, but it does have two walls, but the rest is wide open cage where the bed is there, a little tiny sink and toilet, and a desk. And then the last, 48 hours or so, there's 3 guards in front of it at all times, and they're dictating every movement that inmate makes. They get up and brush their teeth 5 times. It's dictated down 5 times. Every single thing that they do, whether they eat, whether they don't eat, where they clean their cell, because some of them will, they're in such a state of denial. They're like, I'll finish my meal later on and save it, put it back for me. Things like that. Well, I'll go over, I'll be the last one to speak to them, but I try not to say much of anything because everything is being dictated. And I just don't like anything written down or transcribed that I'm saying to these individuals. So I let them talk. I just listen for the most part. When it comes time for the execution, the guard will tap me on the shoulder, say, it's time. I go back to the debriefing room. They get the inmate ready to go, meaning in the shackles and that. And we're brought over, and then that inmate walks right over to the table out of the death cell, comes in through the room into the death chamber, gets up on the table themselves, and strap them down. And I've never seen any of them argue, fight, resist, anything like that. It's almost like a deer in headlights.
What are those conversations like before they go in to be executed?
Some of them they're tough conversations. Because now you're down to the final hour of your entire life. And it's not like you're witnessing somebody in hospice where they're suffering and you're like waiting for them to pass because you want their suffering to end. These individuals are upright, mobile, everything. They are, joking the night before, everything like that. And then the next thing you know, you have to say your final goodbye before you go over to the other side of the glass, a few feet away to witness them, take their last breath. So, typically they're pretty subdued. They're, it's very, it's very difficult to describe when you're talking about seeing the person for the last time. And they've also written letters typically that last day or two. So it's really odd, like 3 or 4 or 5 days later when you check your mailbox and then you get that letter from that individual who's already dead. So, and that's usually where they'll say their final goodbyes to you in the letter form, and that because it's easier for them to put it in writing than to say it verbally.
Do you find that many of them in their last days, or like in your experience, do many of them express remorse for the actions that got them there, or is it something that they have just kind of come to terms with, and maybe remorse isn't the right word to describe what they feel?
I've never had anybody express any remorse. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, I was fooled by one thinking he was remorseful. Because again, when you spend 28, 29, 30 years on death row, you learn a few things, and they can be very manipulative. And this individual who I found fascinating from the sense of he wanted to be known as basically the next Adolf Hitler, about the same size, Hitler mustache, hair, from Cleveland, Ohio, Frank Spizak, and hated anybody that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Wanted to be the head of the Aryan nation, you name it, he wanted to do it, even though he was so little in stature. So he goes into Cleveland State University, shoots like 5 people in that, and he's just bizarre individual, and very hateful, very racist. Even in his trial, he had the Hitler mustache. Fast forward into when I come across him on death row in Ohio, and he reached out to me. He went from hating Jews and blacks and homosexuals and anybody that wasn't white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, changed his name from Frank Spizak to Francis Ann. He was openly homosexual, wanted to have a sex change, and had his spiritual advisor was African American. I'm thinking this dude has done a 180, and literally tried to get the sex reassignment surgery and everything, but the state wouldn't agree to it.
That's wild.
Comes time for his execution. I'm sitting there with him at the death chamber and or in the death cell, and we're talking, or he's talking. I'm listening. He's like, "Do you think I really should be put to death? Based on my mental disorder?" And I'm like, "Listen," I said, that takes a long time and a lot of assessments and appraisals to determine, what type of diagnosis you really have. I said, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point. It's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, yeah. And I thought he was remorseful. He's like, I'm not the same monster. He gave me pictures of himself when he was younger, everything. He gave it all to me from the death cell. And he's like, I just want you to know I'm not that same monster. And here's the proof of what I really was like, and and how I am now. And I thanked him, appreciated, went, watched him, took my seat for the execution. Came time for his last statement. And again, the execution chamber is really, it's really weird. So there's like 3 little seats on one side, a partition, a cement partition, doesn't go all the way to the ceiling, but a partition, and then 3 or 4 seats on the other side for the state witnesses. So I'm always with the defense. They're then the state, so we never come in contact. And then behind you, the reporters will stand up and they'll dictate everything that you're witnessing, basically. And it's like you can hear a pin drop in there. You can hear the pencil to the paper, the pens to the paper. That's how quiet it is. The silence is deafening. Well, Frank, gets on the table and they ask him, if he wants to make his statement, and he's already strapped down, and he asked the warden to hold his statement. He had it written out, and he held it up, and he started reading everything off in German. So that infuriated the witnesses, the ones that survived, and the other ones, and they wanted to come to the class and kill him themselves. And I'm like, Jesus Christ! I thought this guy was remorseful, and here he is, reciting, Hitler and everybody else again. So, yeah, I've never seen anybody.
And the English translation of that German was he was cussing his black minister and also denying that he wanted the sex change. He took that back. Operation. So
the sad part is the German language sounds angry anyways. Yeah. So it could have been something very peaceful and it still sounded angry. So, but I don't think the translation was very remorseful or nice. So,
that's just incredible. The links people will go through to, try to get out of prison.
Yes.
And I was talking with Bill Noguera, a mutual friend of ours who wrote a book, and it's Through the Lens of a Monster. But he was telling me kind of some of the same stories where people would spend, months and months and months with a fingernail file and, to make a shank. Or he told a story of a guy that cut a hole behind his calf and over time made a pouch essentially under his muscle where he could put a shank. And, I think that kind of lines up with your story of, you're going so far as he would probably have gotten that sex change if they would have allowed it,
Yes.
thinking that, oh, this is my way out of something.
I mean, it was so Ohio's death row is a little bit more relaxed than San Quentin's. So when I went to San Quentin's death row, you're locked in the cage with the individuals. You still eat and drink, from the vending machines there, but you're locked in the cell with them. And there's no getting out of that one. In Ohio, you're free to move around. They're out of their cells more than they're in their cells. There's a lot of amenities that are afforded to them and things like that. In fact, I'm flying to Ohio in 2 weeks to interview a serial killer down there that we've been filming on location of bodies and stuff. And he just emailed me and said that we can still eat and drink and everything. We should be no problem. I had to request no shackles or chains. I don't know if they'll allow that, because when you see them on TV, they make them present that it's a very safe and secure environment. So typically they're behind glass, they're in shackles, they're in a box, or handcuffs or anything like that. So it looks like, they're just secured at all times. When I go to death row here in Florida, there's 25 inmates walking around at any given time. We go up to the canteen, we can get, frozen pizza, we can get ice cream, burgers, pop, for hours and hours. I think 6 hours, 7 hours at a time. And you're walking around, you get your pictures taken, you can color, you can play games, cards, whatever you want. One guard, 25 death row inmates, and the visitors at each table. So you're walking around. So there is no, if they want to kill you, they can kill you. In fact, they told me in Ohio before, the guards will let anybody in. We decide if you get to go home for dinner or not. And it's true. It's their house. So these individuals, they for the most part, they get along. I can't speak for San Quentin's like Bill and them, because that was the largest death row population at the time, was San Quentin. It's 700 to 900 people. And you're talking a lot of serial killers, mass murderers, everything else, gangbangers, everything that was sentenced to death. Because California never put anybody to death, they just expanded it more and more. Even though I have a lot of inmates that were on San Quentin's death row, they were free to send a ton of art. They wrote. California is still the only state that I know that you can still send 40 stamps to every letter. I could put 2 books of stamps in every letter and mail it to them. Most states, you can't even mail a letter to that individual anymore. So it goes to a processing center. So if I mail somebody to Ohio death row, now it has to go through a processing center. They'll scan it and electronically it goes to them. Florida, the same way. Most states are like that now. California is different. It goes right to them. So, every state is different when it comes to death rows, the way they manage their death row populations. And so, like you mentioned, Bill was talking about the guy that would cut, to keep a shank in and hit and stuff like that. In Ohio, they have no reason for it, because everybody's moving around. Frank Spizak, I still have the letters that he would tell me in the letters about all the sex he was having on death row. And then finally he wrote me and he's like, hey, we can talk about anything you want, but we got to stop talking about the sex because the guards are catching on and I don't want them to cut me off. So, I mean, it's a different society.
And is this with other prisoners, or is this with guests that come in?
Oh, no, it's other prisoners and who knows, maybe some guards too. So the guards, some of them they have their jobs as a guard, but they also have, this one may be in charge of the dope. This one's in charge of cell phones. This was in charge of porn. This was in charge of cell phones, you name it. So, I mean, I have, my cell phone, I think when I looked last time, 465 voicemails from different death rows laying there, because they call sometimes 6, 8, 10 times a day. They email every single day nonstop. They send letters. They do everything. I have over 3,000 pieces of art laying around.
I was about to say, I think that's incredible too.
It's ridiculous sometimes. I have death row uniforms. I had a shank sent to me from Florida's death row. I have paintings made out of human blood, semen, everything. I got models. Like, I don't know
They
if you can
sent
see
you a
this.
shank in the mail.
You know,
Oh, wow.
I mean, they're pretty neat. I mean,
Is it a
some of the stuff
baseball car? You
is
have racing stock car?
yeah. And then I got let's see, this looks like a Harley Davidson motorcycle.
Well, Christmas is coming up, so your mailbox
Yeah.
will probably be full with.
So then here's the problem. So then I get some that will hold my mail. So like I have shoes waiting for me in Ohio's death row, from an inmate, and they're just, one of the guards hates my guts. I don't know why. I've never met him. I've never talked to a guard in my life there, but for some reason he hates me, probably because I talk about guards like that on these shows. And he flat out told the guy, I'll see if I'll decide later on if I'm going to send it to Kimberlin or not. I had all of Scott Peterson's stuff come up missing from San Quentin, because when he got transferred from San Quentin to Mule Creek, he sent everything to me. When his cell was, gathered up, all the art, everything like that, it's never arrived. And that's been years ago. He filed appeals with it, everything, because guards will take it and sell it because it's worth money.
I was going to say, I didn't realize till I met you just the market that there is for serial killer art.
It's crazy. I mean, people really spend a lot of money for this stuff. In fact, it's not that I don't buy art at all. So, because first of all, my wife would kill me if I added more to the room over there by buying it. She gets pissed as it is when they start showing up. So I had a buddy of mine who is really close with Keith Jesperson, the Happy Face Killer. And he gave me a painting, my buddy did, because he has all of his artwork. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty cool painting. So, it glows in the dark and everything like that. So I thought, well, at least I better write Jesperson, tell him that I have a piece of his art and I appreciate it. That dude who wanted me shot, stabbed, drawn, and quartered hates my guts just because I didn't send him money. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to send you money. Why would I send you money? I don't send anybody money. That's my art. I want that art back. I want you dead. I want your family dead. Whatever, dude. I don't care. You're not getting it back. But yeah, so they make a lot of money on death row. So
yeah, I've seen like the Gacy paintings. Those are some huge money.
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine. He's a great guy. I think he has like 40 of them in his own personal collection in his museum. And you're talking minimum, $5,000-$6,000 each one.
Given that the market there is for this art, do you find, there's a lot of instances like with Richard Ramirez and some of these famous serial killers that develop a kind of cult following, or even they maybe even get married in prison. But with people that are less famous that are on death row, is there still a subculture of people who are intensely interested in those individuals? And not necessarily like with an academic background like yourself or someone, but just people that are just obsessed with these people that are on death row and kind of will reach out to them?
Yes, especially in Europe. So European countries, Netherlands is really big in this. Anybody in the UK, France, places like that, Germany. Since there are no death rows over there, there's no death penalty in Europe. There's none in Canada. There's none in Mexico. So the countries outside of the U.S., those individuals really like to buy, purchase, and collect anything from death row. So they'll reach out, and these inmates on death row, they have websites for pen pals, and these guys will get their names from the websites, and they'll write them, and they'll establish a relationship as a pen pal with them, and send stuff back and forth, and they'll send them money, put on the books, they'll send them art, they'll sell it to other people. I mean, it's a huge market out there.
Yeah, that's just amazing, the quality of life that they have as opposed to if they weren't on death row, because they wouldn't have a lot of the amenities I know that Bill was saying that, he was used to having his own cell to himself. And once he was transferred, he had a cellmate. And I know the canteen is less available sometimes. And
they get locked down more often. So I have a lot of inmates that they will file appeal after appeal, a lot of times to um, make the families of the victims suffer even more, make them relive it, um, with no desire or hope of ever winning those appeals, but it keeps them going longer and longer because they don't want to go to general population. Especially if you are the type of killer that's also molested kids or babies, because I have those as well. You put them in general pop, they're never going to sleep very good ever. Put them on death row, they're just like everybody else. So you don't have to worry about, they call them chomos, you don't have to worry about them on death row because everybody's down for the same, horrible crimes.
Yeah, I actually just recorded a show about Richard Ramirez being hunted in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and of how he was stabbed, but they had to kind of trick him out of his cell to get him out in the yard.
Yeah. A lot of them, they'll hang back in their cells. I have guys that haven't been outside in years and years. Not that they're afraid to, they just like, why bother? I'm fine where I'm at. And they keep to themselves. They have the amenities that they need and want. It's a different mindset where you get on general population, you have a cellie that you can never trust. And then, you're out in the yard with a bunch of people that you have no idea who they are, because on death row, the pods are still split. So you're going to be accustomed to the same individuals day in and day out on your pod anyways. And they work together. I get guys that, some will send me stuff through other people so they don't have to worry about the guards seeing them send it to me and things like that. I just got stuff sent to me from the Craigslist killer, and I've never met him in my life. I don't even know who he is. But painting showed up. So I had to look him up. I'm like, damn it, there's another person I got to look up. So, and it came right from death row through a different inmate.
When they send you these paintings, are they expecting you to respond with some kind of, review or positive affirmation? Like, what do they want from you specifically? Like, what's the exchange? It's one way when they send it to you, but what do they want from you on your end, do you think?
Typically, they just don't want to be forgotten. So they want to have that notoriety of, if I put it in a book, if I mention them on a show, if I publish something with their artwork in it, then that keeps them, doing more and more. They just want to, because they know that somebody like myself who has a fairly decent academic background, on top of now being put in the media more because of what I have done over the years, they know that if I show a couple of their pieces off to somebody, anybody, even overseas, then those individuals will reach out to them and write to them. And maybe that'll be the connection they need to get more money put on their books. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
It's their way of networking.
Interesting.
So I know that you've got the Scott Peterson paintings.
Yes.
Don't you have some BTK ones as well too?
Yeah, I have a bunch of his stuff.
How was that like writing him?
Oh, it was painful. Jesus, like getting a root canal, and I've never had a root canal. So that guy, Dennis Rader, was very OCD, very controlling, he's the type that when you hear everybody talk about a serial killer where they want to always be in control and they want to be this, and this, most of them are not like that with me. He was. So he gave me a code name. I had to use a code name with him. He had to use one. So instead of Dr. Bill, it was Dr. Will. Go figure. And for him, I had to address him as Cancer Pisces. And again, I still don't know why, but that's what he wanted to be known as. So he wrote me the letters, gave me the permission. He would write it out almost like a legal document, grant me permission to use it at any time, anywhere, whatever. Every time he would write me, he would send me stuff art-wise that he had done, but he would weigh it, put down how many ounces it was on the inside of the envelope. And then if he wrote me a 4 or 5 page letter, he could have kept it at 1.5, but the other pages were summarizing what he had already told me. And then he would write in all the margins. He wrote in every aspect of it, everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the stuff would lay around. I'd have to psych myself up to opening it up because I knew I'd have to read it.
Right.
And so one day I must have published something on social media and a piece of art, and I never put the inmates' names down typically. That send me the art for various reasons. One, I never want to glorify these individuals, but I also don't want other people. They'll poach. I call it poaching. They'll poach. They'll say, "Oh, that's a Peterson or whatever." I'm going to write him, and they'll say negative things about me that I'm selling everything, and then hope that person will stop writing me and send them stuff. So I always tell everybody, if they follow me on Instagram or Facebook, whatever, they can DM me. Then I'll tell them who did that privately. So Dennis Rader, at one point, somebody must have asked me as a question, and I wrote back, publicly that it was BTK. Well, he found out about it, and he got pissed, and he's a big Star Wars fan and loves Batman and all that, and he put me in what's called Carbon Freeze because I didn't use his code name, and I wasn't allowed to talk to him until he said so again. So yeah, yeah, he's something else.
It's just laughable how fragile these guys' egos are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And he was probably one of the. Anthony Solwell was another one. The Cleveland Strangler. He killed 11 victims and lived with the bodies in his house and his backyard and everything. He was pretty high profile. So I was the first one to interview him face to face on death row, and it was over and over. I'd go back to death row and see him. He was in Chillicothe at the time, death row. But he only wanted me to speak to him. He wanted me to not speak to anybody else. And he would get mad if he heard that I was talking to somebody else, or I came down to visit somebody else and I didn't see him. It's like a 7th grader. It's like, if you're not my friend, just my friend only. I don't want to be your friend. And I mean, it was just, I'm like, man, you are such a little bitch, for killing 11 women. You are just horrible. So yeah. Some of them are very comical when you think about it. And that's what I use a lot of humor on death row, a lot of humor. And they'll send me paintings or whatever, and they'll be horrible. And I'll tell them, Jesus, man, I hope you killed better than you paint, because your paintings suck. And they love that aspect that I don't try to talk academic to them. I don't talk down to them or anything like that. And then that gets that rapport going. And then when they find out from other inmates, because I rarely reach out to any of them now, they find my name and reach out to me. But they find out that I don't sell I still have the very first letter I've ever received, over 20 years ago from death row. I have every single envelope, every painting, everything. So they find out that I don't sell them out, and I don't profit from them or anything like that. And so they trust me quite a bit. So, there's a lot of respect that goes back and forth.
Is there any plan to do anything with all this besides keeping in boxes and hang a few pieces up?
Yes. So when I'm done with everything, because we're in the process of filming, a pretty huge project now, and I'll see where that leads to after this. But when I'm finally done and I can walk away from death row and not have to see these individuals and receive I just want to sell it all, dump it to my retirement or whatever. I can, if I could sell it today and be done with everything, but I can't because I'm under contract, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'm not the kind of guy that'd be like, oh my God, that's my identity. How am I going to, what am I ever going to? No, 20 some years of death and despair and just, the worst of the worst. I could walk away from it at any point and be done with it. But in the meantime, I stack it up in the kids' spare bedroom, and wifey she tries to organize it. So I don't know if you can see or not. So these are just a couple of the Peterson files that I have. These are all just letters, of starting from 2016 up to now. So you're talking, every one of those are letters.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't even include the artwork or anything like that. And then I'm waiting he's sending me his typewriter too. So, I mean, I just had her to do those so I could get everything organized in one spot for those because of doing some more research and that. But I have I have no idea what I have. I have no. I went in there because thinking, well, I can do some of that stuff, so she doesn't get so pissed at me. I opened up one box from I think Philip Jablonski, and Glenn Wade Jennings are two people I know. I know they're dead already, and I picked up like 30 letters that have never been opened ever. I'm like, how the hell did I not open these? I got to hide these. I got to hide them so she doesn't see them. So yeah,
you can sell them that way
because they've never been opened.
Yeah.
What is the weirdest thing that any of these people on death row have ever sent you in terms of like whether it's a work of art or an object or anything?
So like I have these set of hands that I screwed up with on those because
you sent me a picture of that, and I thought that it was real. I was like, holy shit, right? He just got a severed hand.
Two of them wrapped up, and so they came in a box, and I had just started my new position down here in Florida, and everybody, of course, always wants to ask you everything about death row and stuff, and I'm like, it's to the point now, nothing excites me. So I said, I have a box out in my truck. It's been sitting out there for like 2 weeks. It's never even been opened. It's from the only female Native American on death row. She's in Chowchilla. She killed like 5 people. I said, I'm certain it's a scarf or something like that because that's what she sends me. And that's all I need is a scarf in Florida when it's like Cambodia hot down here. So I said, I'll bring it in. You can open it. This is a person, the head of HR, and they're all excited. So I dropped it off at the office. I'm like, I'll stop back tomorrow or whatever, check up and see what. Well, I got a phone call that I had to go down to HR. And I thought, well, they must have opened it. They want me to explain it. I didn't know if I was going to lose my job or what. They didn't know what they had it set back, and they didn't know if they should touch or not because it looked like real hands. I'm like, the hell is that? They're like, that's what you just had us open. I'm like, oh, yeah, got some splaining to do. So yeah, you just never know what you're going to get. I mean, yeah. So those were odd. Yeah.
Hold on, I've just found the picture of it, and
did you? Yeah,
yes, I'm going to try to get it on the screen here. And you can give me your impression of it, Brian, because
all right,
yeah,
hold on. Let's see. Yeah, and Bill, you got some guys actually have done some legit artwork, and other guys kind of look like a little kid did it. Hold on 1 second, guys. All right, if I can.
While he's trying to figure that out, Brian. So some of them, I get oil on canvas, acrylic on canvas, watercolor. So they have all kinds of stuff. And a lot of them, I'm not an artist by any means, and I don't try to interpret anything, but I noticed a huge pattern of people doing more like Bob Ross style paintings, when I first started getting them. And because one thing I refused to do is tell them what I wanted art-wise. My thinking was you're being told what to do 24/7. Art is supposed to be an expression, express yourself, send me whatever. I don't care if it's a stick figure or whatever. I didn't tell them because I'm never going to look at it anyways. But so they said this stuff, and then I find out from other inmates, they're like, yeah, we do that just to try to impress the public, to make them think that we're changing on death row, that we're becoming more peaceful and and harmony and everything else. That's why you don't see a lot of the dark art out there. So next thing I know, I'm getting all I get 15, 20 Bob Ross style paintings in a day, and I'd end up writing the inmate back saying, listen, I'm tired of this crap. If you're not going to send me what you're really thinking that goes through your mind, then quit sending me stuff. And then next thing you know, it's the skull and crossbones,
human blood, hands,
semen, everything.
I've got some pictures that Bill has sent me that were made with blood and semen, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
But then here is the hand.
Oh my God, that looks real. That looks real. That looks
Yeah, I
real.
know.
Yeah.
They're still in the plastic, by the way.
Yeah.
Good
was like,
God, yeah.
Had to stare at it.
Yeah, that's what my HR department got to open up.
That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna probably get removed from YouTube for putting that up.
Yeah, so you never really know what to expect. Like when I got the uniform in the mail, I had no idea what that was going to be. And I posted it, of course, because that's different. And I didn't say who it was from or anything like that. Sure enough, somebody down in Ohio or wherever it came from, Florida, California, they found out about it. And then that inmate got thrown in the hole for 30 days because it wasn't supposed to be sent out.
But it's funny just thinking about the thought process of like doing the peaceful landscapes or mountains, and you almost become their like art coach. You're like coaching this like authenticity out of them and their kind of artwork. They just really want to express this like darkness and this like terrible stuff that's going through their head and kind of bringing that out. And
it is a
cathartic moment with.
Well, and again, you're dealing with like school children. On a playground, other than the fact that they've killed a lot of human beings, so they don't want to. They always want to one up the other person. So if I tell somebody, and I've done this out of just, I've lied, I should say, out of spite. Just listen, I've gotten enough of the acrylic and the oil paintings, but this one dude said he's going to send me painting made out of human blood, and I can't wait for that because that stuff. Well, that I could do that. I'll one up that. I'll send you human blood and semen. I'm like, okay. So next thing you do that. So then, and then next thing you know, I'm like, how do I get so much artwork? Nobody can send me anything different. Then they'll start sending you their prison IDs, and then their headphones, then their uniforms, and then their shoes, and then models, and so they try to smuggle stuff out that they can send me that's just going to one up the other person. So they can say they were the only one to ever send that to me.
Yeah.
It's like a competition.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I think you're going to have like your own little museum, kind of like your Ripley's Believe It or Not.
That's what everybody says. Here's the thing. I wouldn't know how to set it up. The only thing I know how to do is throw it in there on the bed and listen to wifey bitch about how she's got to figure out who this artist is and what portfolio goes into and what container and everything. Because I don't, I mean, when I say it's stacked, it is stacked up under the bed. She got a dresser for the kids for when they come visit. And I'm like, when she wasn't there and she went to Ohio to check on the parents for a week, I was getting all this stuff. So I'm stuffing it in all the drawers. And she came back. She's like, "Oh, the room looks nice and clean." I'm like, "Yeah, I put everything away." She's like, "That's great." And next thing you know, she opens up the drawers and boom, it's all popping out. Like, oh,
a pair of hands fell out.
So yeah, I at some point I got to do something with it. I just don't know what, because again, it's a fine line that I have to walk. If I were to put it in a museum or an art shop or whatever, and sell it or charge people to see it, because it's value, the value is there, then there's going to be a segment of the population that is going to not like me so much for profiting off of the worst of the worst in our society. So, I have to balance out that part of my life as well, because I don't want people to think that I'm just getting all this stuff to make money from it, which I guess ultimately at the end of the day you do when I do get rid of it. But it's so for instance, when I was in Ohio, and I only had, maybe I let an art museum or art gallery borrow like 150 pieces to set up during Halloween. They were going to do it for 3 or 4 days, charge admission. They asked if they could, if I could loan them some stuff and speak. And I said, well, I'll do it on one condition, that whatever you charge, that money has to go towards victims of violent crimes or domestic violence or whatever. And they're like, okay, that's fine. So it was only going to go for like 3 days and went for like 3 months because people kept coming from all over, and it generated a ton of money, which did do some good. So that part I can understand, but at some point, I had a lot of time and money, I guess, invested in all this stuff. It's got to go. So,
Well, it certainly makes for an awkward nameplate in the museum to have semen on canvas or something listed.
it really does, right? What's the medium you use? Semen, blood. So yeah,
I was going through some of these
crazy.
pictures, and I was thinking the first time I had them on, I was like, I know this is going to get flagged. There's no way I can put this up.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really spin that in a positive light, when you have bloody scrotum on a literally. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see it there, like the bloody scrotum and everything in his ball sack, and I'm like, what the hell did you do? He's like, you can't tell? No, I can tell. Yeah. And then
That's got to be the best plug for your Instagram right there.
Oh my God, and then I have some that's painted, female genitalia, breasts, and everything else in colored, blue paint and everything else. And I'm like, what's the significance of this? He's like, get a black light and you'll know, because you'll see my semen.
That's what you don't. Yeah, and that's what you don't want to tell your wife as well. What's the significance of this one? Get a black light. I'll show you.
I told wifey, I'm like, get a black light out eventually and check that out. She's like, Jesus Christ. I touched this.
Man.
I'm like, yeah.
I was going to say, do you give her a pair of gloves when she's going through all this stuff?
Well, that's the thing. You never know at the time, because it doesn't say on the outside of the envelope, semen or blood, because they have to hide that stuff in between other paintings. So
right.
If I get 15, 20 paintings at one time, then I have to turn every one of them over to see what they're hiding on the back, because I know that they're sending a whole bunch to hide other stuff. Evidence, like actual crime scene photos, because some of them will fire their attorneys and represent themselves. Therefore, they get the discovery. Right. So, the murder scene of them killing the victim, the person having their autopsy done, everything, not a copy of the picture. The actual pictures are taped on the back of paintings smuggled out to me. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
Oh, tell Brian and everyone about that guy that was sending stuff to your son.
Oh man. So yeah, we laugh about it now. So when I first started on death row, one of the guys that I met, James Filiagi, was approaching his execution date within the year or so. So I would go down and I'd interview him. Nice guy, as far as killers go. And he knew I had, a son and a wife and a daughter. So our son was really young at the time. So he's like, I'm going to send him games and puzzles and stuff like that, because he's got to do good in school. He doesn't want to wind up here. I'm like, yeah, you're right, whatever.
Oh,
he would send stuff, and he would send puzzles. They'd send chewing gum. He'd send all kinds of stuff. I'd open it up. I let my kid look at it, as an 8-year-old would. And he's like, oh, can I have that? No, he really can't. But yeah. So he got to know the guy. Is James Filiagi. He called him Jimmy. So he got to the point where he was expecting me to get something in my post office box weekly or bi-weekly for him to look at. And then he would also send recipes home for my wife to cook. And at the time, that was the big no. My wife just couldn't cook at the time. I'm like, no, don't do it, dude. Don't do it. He'd send it. Well, fast forward to execution. I see him the day before, blah, blah, blah. We're talking. He's like, you never told me if your wife ever liked any of those recipes or anything. I'm like, dude, I told you she couldn't cook. I said, in fact, I'll make a deal with you. I'll take the needle for you. You take her cooking. And at the end of the day, we'll find out who won this battle. So again, that's the humor. Less than 24 hours away from his execution. Execution happens. I close my file up. He's done. I put that one away. 3-4 weeks go by. And my son, Bailey's like, hey, I heard from Jimmy lately. I'm like, who? He said, Jimmy down at the prison, your buddy. He's like, I haven't got anything lately. I'm like, he's dead. They killed him a couple weeks ago. He's like, and my wife is sitting there, and he just starts crying. And she's like, and you're the psychologist, you idiot? You didn't see this coming? I'm like, I'm more of adult psychology. I didn't see that one coming. So yeah, life lesson learned there.
He went to
And
go live at the farm.
yeah, whoops. So yeah, it's been a journey. Now my kids can care less.
Do any of these individuals ever like bequeath their ashes to you or anything? Has that
Yeah.
ever happened? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one in Florida that just died, I was supposed to get his in. I was supposed to go to his wedding. He met a girl from France. That's this year. And he was in the infirmary because he had cancer. She flew over. He couldn't get on the phone to get me to Starkey in time. They actually married, and then he died like 2 days later. But since she was the wife, she got the ashes. So she emails me, introduces herself, says, I was her husband's best friend, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, sorry about your loss, whatever. She's like, I understand he gave you all of his artwork and everything. I'm like, I have it all. She's like, I was wondering if I could have a few pieces for the memorial. I'm like, you know what? I'm supposed to have his ashes. I don't even know whatever happened to them. She's like, oh, I have those. They sent him. I'm like, well, then you better send me half those ashes then, and I'll send you some art. She's like, I don't know if they can do that in the mail. They can do it. With enough stamps, they can do it. So she's supposed to be sending me. But other ones, yeah, they've when they die, I'm supposed to spread their ashes here if I want or do whatever. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
How do you deal with that as far as getting to know someone on their last days alive? And then it seems like you just take the file and move on to the next one.
Listen, this is probably the hardest part of the job that I do is admitting the fact that I've become so desensitized, horribly desensitized to death and murder. And it's not something I'm proud of by any means. Just today, my wife and I were talking because from my hometown in Ohio, I was on a board of a prison in the town next to us, same counties or whatever, small community. And just last night, there was a guy who decided to kill his soon-to-be ex-wife, or his ex-wife was moving stuff out of the house. He was supposed to be at work. She had a friend over. They have 2 kids together, a 7-month-old and a 7-year-old. He comes in, shoots the boy, the adult boyfriend, I guess, that she was seeing, kills him, puts a bullet in the 7-month-old baby's head. And this is all last night. The 7-year-old, again, his son, shoots him 3 times, kills him. And then the wife's like, you got to kill me now. You killed everybody in front of me. And he kills himself. So leaves the wife. And I was just reading this and telling my wife, I'm like, yeah, that sucks because I knew the guy that got killed. And I'm like, yeah, it really sucks. And that's it. I have become kind of numb to that stuff. And that's not a good thing. So I really have no problem when they get executed and they're done. And I close up obviously of finding 30 letters I never opened. I missed an execution that way by not opening a letter. So, I'll probably have to seek counseling later on in life when I retire from it all. But it's really sad when you get a letter in the mail or an email from somebody that said, I killed like 2 people, and I'm thinking, why should I waste my time then? Only 2 people? That's nothing. I'm used to 25, 30, or Sam Little killed 89. These are people I've dealt with forever. And you should never think that because one human life is too many. And so you start thinking that way. So, yeah, it's not a good feeling, but you get too numb.
Yeah, and I get the whole being desensitized, and I was a cop for 20 years, and the only ones that started to get to you were the kids that were murdered, but just a regular like everyday gang member that was shot because they're doing crack on the wrong block. Yeah. I mean, I completely get that. It was just okay, another one was killed.
Yeah.
Time for the next shift. Let's go get something to eat.
And people always talk about doctors being the worst patients. Your brother would know. So it's if I ever tried to even speak, because I have a lot of friends that are psychologists as well because of the field I'm in, psychology. But if you ever want to sit down and really talk to them about the trauma that you have witnessed of the executions and the reliving these murders over and over again, really they're just fascinated by what you do. So they're asking you questions like, it's like, oh my God, what's this like? Well, what's that like? And then next thing you know, it's like, I'm doing another show with you, and it's so there is no therapy involved because they're too. It's an area that not too many people have ever gotten to see up close and personal. So their human nature is they're interested. So yeah, so I drink.
Yeah, no, I'm not judging for that. So,
do you think that some of these prisoners view their interactions with you because they know that you're a psychologist? I mean, do they view it as a kind of therapy in a way?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm their confessor, their therapist, everything. And so I let them. You know, I've learned over the years the least amount of questions I ask them, the more they tell me. And I've learned over the years to never express any type of emotion when I'm sitting across from them eating and drinking, because they like to try to elicit some type of emotion from most people to get them going to see what they're really interested in. So, you know, when I have a guy say, you know, in Ohio who, you know, killed like 3 or 4 people, drug deal gone bad, him and his brother went in there and he blamed the victims, especially the guy that held the 5-month-old up, and he leveled his 9mm off and he went to shoot the guy, and the kid, he was holding the kid, and he shot the kid in the head. And he's like, I mean, what kind of guy holds a kid up for to try to keep him from getting shot? And I'm like, what kind of guy shoots at a guy holding a baby to begin with? I said, so what did you do? He's like, I felt bad about that one, but then I finished the other guy off. He said, but they tried to charge me with that murder, and that's not my fault. He shouldn't have held him up as a human shield. I mean, they try to justify it. And then you have to sit there, and you've learned over the years, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, good talk, move on. And so when they see that you don't judge them, and you're not there to pass judgment on them for the crimes that they've committed, then they end up telling you more and more.
And you've heard a lot of different stories from lots of different people, so there's probably very little out there that will really shock you when you hear it. Do you remember, even if it was a while back ago, the last time an inmate said something to you that actually did just shock you, even if just for a moment, even if you didn't show that?
Yeah, probably one of the last executions that I witnessed when we're on death row. We had 8 hours to walk up and down death row, do whatever we want. We ordered the last meal, we had it delivered to the prison, which was weird, $80 worth of Italian food. But, they delivered it to death row. We're walking up and down, just the inmate and I, nobody else around. And he's like, Jesus Christ, Kimberlin, you're going to kill me tomorrow, right? I'm like, yeah, it looks like it. He's like, so I've been thinking that if I killed another person, like right now, they couldn't kill me tomorrow, right? They have to try me and everything, right? So they have to stay the institution. And I'm looking around. There's not even this guy's a big dude. I'm like, dude, no, they're still going to put you to death. They're going to try and abstent you, but you're already going to be dead. They're going to bring embarrassment to your family and everything else. You can't do that. He's like, man, Kimberlin, that's what I have you for, to talk me off the ledge like that. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know how I thought that up, but I am the only person around. So that one there kind of floored me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. One of the guys I'm working with right now, serial killer wise, has a lot of bodies, and I have the maps to those bodies, some of them so far, and we've been working on that for a year now with cadaver dogs and the guy from the body farm, and NCIS is working with us now because there are a couple of them around the naval base, but he was probably the one that has most people, when they hear about him, he is probably the most evil one I think I've dealt with, because he has no remorse, nothing for any of his victims. I asked him on camera, what he would do if he would, if he was set free. And he's like, I said, would you go to the woods and just chill out and get away from society? Nah, I'd go back to the same hometowns and, kill the family members off, wipe the bloodlines out. I'm
crazy.
Like, I said, what happened if you haven't seen your kids in like 15 years? What would you say to them if I were to bring them into you? He looked me dead in the eye. He's like, I wouldn't say that. I'd probably kill them. I regret not killing them so they wouldn't have my last name. I mean, just as a matter of fact.
Something I'm curious about with this. So when you originally, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, when you said that you were really kind of like you didn't have any kind of hands-on experience with like this issue of capital punishment, and you wanted to put yourself in a position to see this up front, like you had like with abortion and other kinds of issues. At a certain point in time, you had seen capital punishment up close and personal. You had witnessed executions. You had been in touch with lots of inmates. What is it at this point, having kind of accomplished that original goal? What is the kind of goal for you in these interactions, if it's not that original one?
So my goal now has been for the last few years is to try to bring some closure to some family members out there of these other victims when we recover the remains of them. These aren't even cold cases. These are murders that took place that he has never been charged with even. So, I have the sketches, I have the maps, I have everything. We just need to recover those. And then he has more that he'll give me once these are recovered. So there's that aspect of it. And then I really wanted to still teach as much as I could to the general public what death row and the execution process is really like. Not what you see on TV, not what you read about in some of these magazines and newspapers. Because when I went to death row, I was expecting, just like most people were, these guys were going to be handcuffed and shackled when I see them. They were going to be, pumping sunlight into their cells. They're going to be locked down 23 hours a day, put in a dog kennel for 1 hour for exercise until they're executed. And I get there, and it's the cleanest part of the prison I've ever been in, the most quiet part of the prison, free to move around. They have all the amenities. They have televisions, iPads. They have headphones. They have the ability to have people order click lists, any kind of food that you want, minus alcohol and tobacco, because they get that from guards. But like if you want Hostess, Twinkies, cupcakes, you want meals ready to heat up to eat, anything that you can imagine, like from Kroger's, Publix, or whatever it is, they have it. Not even the generic brands. Just like we would go to the store. They can order tennis shoes. They can order whatever they want. And the general public is totally unaware of this. And it's the prison's way of keeping that part of the prison within the prison much more calm and cool and collective, because you're dealing with the worst of the worst, but they hide it from the general public. They hide the execution process from the general public. And worst of all, in my opinion, is the legal process. So for a prosecutor to be the only person to determine if there's going to be a capital murder case or not. The judge can't determine that. Nobody else can. Only the prosecutor, based on the type of crime. So if they fit that, the criteria of a felony murder with a felony being committed during the commission of that, and it's a death penalty state, they will seek that death penalty a lot of times almost like a notch on their bedpost. And they will sell this bill of goods to the family to say, this is the ultimate form of punishment. This is what you want to see happen to this individual so you can get closure. And what the prosecutors never tell them, because 9 times out of 10, the prosecutors have no idea what death row is really like, that family will probably die before the inmate is ever executed, if they're ever executed. And that family is also going to have to relive that murder for the next couple decades through the appeals process, and hope that for some reason it doesn't get overturned, or like Bill's case did, or Pollock's case did, where they're resentenced and the next thing you know, they're out of prison. And nothing against like Bill, he's a great individual, but the family members, because I'm not even sure what he did murder-wise to commit, to get put on death row, but I'm certain at that time that prosecutor convinced that family to go for the death penalty in order to see that closure at the end. And now this guy's walking on the streets, and I don't know if that family is even around anymore, because I don't know anything about the case.
Yeah, with his case, he murdered his girlfriend's mother when he was 18 years old.
Okay.
And the prosecution had originally said that it was that he murdered her for money, which is, I guess, an aggravating factor. And
Sure.
that's why he got the death penalty. And then they later determined that that's not the truth. And so he was eligible for 25 to life and
Mhm.
eligible for parole. And he, was able to get paroled after 44 years.
So, like my other guy, Pollock, who killed a couple people, was just resentenced, this past year to 26 to life, um, eligible for parole right now because he's been on death row for 34 years. Still didn't change the circumstances. He's not guilty. He committed those murders 34 years ago. There was a group of people that were told he was going to be put to death. There was a jury that got together that found him guilty, number one, and then went back and determined that the ultimate form of punishment would be death, that he was suitable to have his life taken for that crime of the murders that he committed. Those family members probably read off their victim impact statements on the record, everything else. So everybody involved expected him to be put to death, and next year he'll be walking the streets.
Have you had that happen before where someone that you met on death row and established a rapport with, circumstances eventually led to their sentence being commuted or to, let's say, the 25 to life, and they got out? And if so, what was your dynamic with them outside of the prison system when they were in the real world again?
So this will be the first one, um, because the parole board contacted me and the attorneys contacted me because of our lengthy years and years of communicating. I have all of his artwork, I have everything, and so the next thing you know, out of nowhere, I get this phone call saying he's up for parole. I'm like, wait a second. I have a letter that says, literally that I'm going to be a witness at his execution and I get his remains. And now you're telling me he's going to be a free member of society. So when he gets out, which again, luckily I've always had a good rapport with all of my inmates, minus Raider and a couple others, but still, where if they do get out, they know that it's always been mutual respect anyway. So it's not that I fear them, but the fact still remains that this wasn't exculpatory evidence that brought about a different verdict. This was something that happens in California quite often where, the jury, maybe there was some tampering, maybe there was an appealable issue with one thing or the other. And the state, instead of wanting to retry a death penalty, kind of like Scott Peterson, well, we're just going to resentence them, give them life without. And, next thing you know, then that sentence could be reduced. And the Menendez brothers, the same way. It's hard for me to fathom how two boys can go into a house, blow their parents to smithereens with shotguns, go back, reload, go back, finish it off or whatever, do whatever they did, and then all of a sudden use the excuse of, abuse throughout, sexual abuse. And that's what led them to this, heinous crime. And let's put them back out into society now. I just, whatever the legal system is fine. It's hard for me to grasp that concept.
Yeah, and I completely get that. And our legal system has a lot of flaws in it, and especially, you hear all the time about cases being overturned because now with DNA, they can come back and review the case. And I think that's one of the issues with the death penalty is it's kind of like, okay, if you mess that up and then we find out after the fact that the person didn't do it, there's no reversing that.
Right. I'm all for testing everything that they have.
Right.
Everything. In the case of Scott Peterson, he keeps me updated all the time on where his case is at and what evidence they need to retest and stuff like that. I'm the kind of guy who's like, listen, if it's there, test it. But the state, again, the states, not just California, a lot of the states will do whatever, like we talked earlier, will do whatever they can to keep these individuals alive in order to kill them. They'll also do whatever they can to keep from testing new evidence or presenting other evidence that could also show that maybe they weren't guilty of those crimes. And I'm not saying that he is guilty or isn't guilty. The jury's already spoken, so therefore I tend to lean in that direction. But if there's other evidence out there that could exonerate him or lead a jury to a different conclusion, then by all means, he should have those rights. But they'll spend years arguing those in the court of law on why they should or shouldn't test him.
Yeah, and there's just so many complex issues. Going back to the original subject, where do you think the death penalty is going to? Do you think lethal injection is going to come off the table, or do you think more states are going to be, looking at alternate forms?
I think it's going to depend on which way the pendulum swings politically. So, when I was looking at my notes, this year so far, we've executed 43 people in the United States compared to 25 last year. So Florida has put to death 16 already this year, and they have 2 more to go. So they're leading the nation. Typically, you're going to see the more conservative states and a conservative Republican administration seek out the death penalty more. And then when the Democrat liberal aspects sway the other way, you see it less. So it's one of those things where it's so politicized, which it shouldn't be, that I think we're going to see an uptick in the executions for quite a few years right now, and by all the different methods. I think that Florida's put to 16 so far and be 18 before the end of the year, all lethal injection. They have no problem using the lethal injection. But like Ohio, where I'm from, they put in a moratorium on it because they don't want to use lethal injection. Now they're looking at gas and or the firing squad. When legislation gets together and they adopt that, you'll see a huge influx of that happen. But I think right now, the more that South Carolina puts them to death with firing squad, the more like Alabama puts them to death with the nitrogen, and those go without any type of botched executions, then you're going to see other states expand that and utilize that as a secondary method, which will expand their death row execution protocols. So,
do you know if they give them anything else before they put the mask on during the nitrogen executions?
So typically they allow them to have, like Ativan, which is, anti-anxiety, like a Valium, diazepam, anything along those lines. They'll do that for a couple of days ahead of time just to relax them, to try to take the edge off. Antihistamines as well, especially for lethal injections to keep the veins open and all that, But as far as the nitrogen, my first experience with that will be next year, so I'm really not certain.
Well, you'll have to come back on and tell us how it went.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the most unique people to talk to, because not many people can say that. I do want to tell people to go pick up your book, Watch Me Die. That's a really crappy picture of it, but I've got it right here. You actually sent me a copy, and I don't know if you can see that, but you wrote my name on one of the vials there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can get that book on Amazon. I believe you've got a Kindle version as well. Barnes & Noble, anywhere where you can buy a book. It's done by Wild Blue Press, the same one that did our book, A Murder on Campus. The Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. That one is also available on Kindle, Audible, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere where you can get a book. Dr. Kimberlin, where can people find you on Instagram and Facebook to look at more of these photos?
Instagram is where I usually put the most pictures up. It's like walkingstick_69 is my name, Native American name, and the year I was born. So it's nothing, other than that. Just look up Bill Kimberlin. There's two of us. There's another one that's a distant relative. He's a way cooler Bill Kimberlin than I am because his best friend is Richard Branson, and he's all over the world. And then there's me. And it'll have a cover of my book, Watch Me Die. And usually what I'll do is I'll post, in Facebook same way, I'll post the artwork as it gets sent in. Then if people DM me a message like who did this or who did this, then I'll tell them in a private message because I don't like to glorify, who did the art. So.
Well, cool. And Dr. Brian, I know that you've got your website, briansantanaauthor.com. You've also got
so it's there. There's
plug your own IG.
Yeah, if you go to @TrueCrimeProfessor, you'll get a sense of what I'm up to right now. I've been following the Nigel Edge, the Southport shooter case that recently happened. So I'm attending the hearings whenever those pop up here in North Carolina. And if anyone listening wants to sign up on my website, briansantanaauthor.com, you'll get a kind of weekly updates about what I'm working on and upcoming projects and appearances.
Awesome.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe to Santana True Crime. You can find me on Instagram and any other social media under Santana True Crime as well. Thank you very much and good night.